What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today, we're continuing our comic book conservation project on this copy of Powerman and Iron Fist number 73, the Rom SpaceKnight crossover, which is the first meeting of Rom, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. Published by Marvel Comics September of 1981, it's got this great Frank Miller cover. This copy belongs to friend of the channel, Mike Mikolovsky, whose YouTube handle is Hugo Danner. Mike asked me to have a look at this newsstand copy from his collection and see what I thought we could do with it. And I decided it might be a good project to demonstrate how our conservation techniques can be applied to modern books. In episode 1, we did a thorough assessment and developed a game plan for this book. Essentially, we determined that while this comic book presented pretty well at arm's length, it had some flaws, including color-breaking spine ticks, soiling, and stains, that would result in the book grading out in the 5.0 to 6.0 range as it sits. Our hope is to address the soiling and stains through dry and wet cleaning methods and stain mitigation if necessary. This comic book appears to have 7.0 to 8.0 potential if we're successful in our endeavors. In episode 2, we dry cleaned the cover, and I went over in detail what methods and materials I use, including when and how I use this block eraser that most comic book cleaners will tell you is a no-no. In episode 3, I disassembled the comic book and separated the cover from the interior wraps so we could wet clean and perform stain mitigation on the cover. We did a total of 2 5-minute in duration deacidification washes with 25% saturated calcium hydroxide solution in warm tap water and 1 drop of Triton X100 to 100 ml of total solution to act as a surfactant to help lift the soiling and stain from the cover, and followed this up with a rinse in a 25% saturated calcium hydroxide solution. When it was clear this was not going to be sufficient to completely lift the stains from the cover, we left the cover in the calcium hydroxide wash and performed concurrent photo bleaching with a 465 nanometer blue LED for 2 total hours. After that, it was time to cold press the cover to dry it out. The initial wash removed some tanning and some of the staining, and I was thrilled with the end result because the stain appears to have been 100% visibly removed. I've created a playlist for this conservation series, so check out that list if you missed any of these episodes and want to view them before watching today's video. Today, we're going to put this book back together, give it a final press, and see how we did. So let's get started. Make sure you have clean and dry hands before you handle your friends' comic books, boys and girls. These interior wraps have just been sitting in Mylar since I separated them from the cover. They have not been wet cleaned, so they should have nice staple holes that we don't have to reestablish. So I don't need a pin here. I'm just going to settle the pages so that they're nice and level, retrieve my staples. Now, I specifically leave the curve in the staple arms that's established when the staple pierces the book. I do this because I want a nice, natural-looking staple. And once you straighten out metal, you can never recurve it exactly the way it was, especially delicate metal like one of these staples, and especially without damaging the paper trying to rebend it. This assuredly makes it more difficult to reinsert the staple than if I had straightened the staple out, but I would rather struggle with it here and have a more natural, pleasing look than have an easier time here and settle for a less correct appearing outcome in the end. The staple arms on the inside of the centerfold leave impressions called witness marks. And those impressions are curved and you can see them in the paper. When you straighten your staple out and then you put it back in the book, The arms don't lay the same way. They don't align perfectly with those witness marks. And it is obvious to anybody who carefully inspects the book that it's been apart and that it hasn't been put together exactly the way it was found. So I've had several people say to me, why are you struggling so much putting the staples back in? Just straighten them out. It's much easier, or use this method or use that method. I'm doing this on purpose, and I know that I'm struggling with it, and I'm okay with that because I think the struggle is worth the result. The juice for me is worth the squeeze here. So it takes me a few extra minutes to replace the staple, but when you look at the centerfold side of one of these books where I've replaced the staples, where I've removed them and then put them back in the book, I think you'll see that it's worth it because it has a very natural look and it's as close to the way it left the manufacturing floor as we can get it, and that's my end goal. So, yeah, that took a couple moments. But what did you have better to do with your time? All right, now that staple's in. Before I bend the arms down, as you know, I want to settle the pages. I want to go left and right centered. I want to make sure top and bottom edges are perfectly straight. We've talked about this before. The cover is not trimmed exactly with the rest of the paper left to right, but it is top to bottom, typically. So top to bottom, you want it perfectly straight. You want the arms pointed straight up of that staple, and you want the paper to be centered left to right. That is to say, there will be a tiny bit of the cover showing on the left and a tiny bit of the cover showing on the right. You want the same amount on both sides. And once you're happy with all of that, stabilize the paper, which I do with this Delrin block, and just push one of the staple arms back down. As I mentioned, that is a nice little curved arm now. And as I push it into place, I guide it exactly back into the original witness marks. And now there's no evidence at all of our passing here. And that's my goal with the staple removal and then replacement. All right, let's see if we can get a little bit luckier with this staple than we did the first one. Again, this would be far easier if I straighten that staple out. But my goal here isn't being easy. My goal here is getting the work right. And I'm being very gentle. I don't want to enlarge these holes. Again, that wouldn't look natural. That wouldn't look as it left the factory floor. What a great Frank Miller cover. There we go. Now, because the top staple is fixed, we shouldn't have quite as much work to do here, but I'll still take a moment because even with the top staple fixed, there's still a small degree of freedom of movement. So again, we just want to triple check everything's aligned before we go ahead and bend these staple arms down into place. And again, you see that I guide it right back down into the original witness mark in the paper. Again, these wraps have not been washed, the interior wraps, so we can see those witness marks very plainly. And you see I get a nice natural looking curved arm in the staple. If we had washed the interior wraps, those witness marks wouldn't be quite as obvious. All right, time to press this book. I've taken a magazine backer board and cut reliefs for these staples. And this is so that I can get a nice tight fold. So I'm aligning the paper now, the cover with the rest of the body. Because the interior wraps were never washed, they were never flattened, so that fold is pretty well established. I guess I should have said at the top that the cover and the interior spent overnight in my humidity chamber. So the covers, and the interior pages for that matter, but the cover especially is quite floppy. So I don't need my tack iron here to establish a nice fold. I can just pull it over the interior pages. So I'm putting in my buffer for the cover. This is 90-pound cardstock, and I chose to put it behind the second wrap. And this just gives me a little bit less stress on the area of the fold where the staples are for a cover that I've washed and that has been in the humidity chamber. I feel a little bit more comfortable with this. I think we're going to get a nice flat cover without that cardstock being immediately under the cover. So buffer above and below is 2 magazine backer boards and a sheet of 100-pound cardstock. I'm going to do 15 minutes at 155 degrees here in my seal press. Then I'm going to let it cool overnight, so we're retrieving it now the next day, and we'll have a look. I think it was the second or third day already that I was working on this book that I realized this big blob across the top, the red, white, and blue pixelated blob, is actually a diarath that Rom is disintegrating that was posing in the story actually as a hooker. It's a pretty interesting story. Anyway, I'm going to remove my 2 cardstock buffers and my magazine backer board, and we'll have a look. And I think the result is a huge success. Look how beautiful the cover is. The interior was already very nice. This cover started off slightly darker than white, and now I think it's slightly lighter than white on the owl card. That stain appears to be completely gone. We'll look at it a little bit more closely later on. Classic 80s Marvel. We've got to get an FF crossover in. Let's look at the centerfold. Look at how beautiful these staples are. Again, they have that natural curvature that they received at the factory. Totally worth the extra few minutes to replace the staples. And again, it does not look like the book has been apart. So we want to leave as little trace of our passing or of our having been there as possible. Back cover, again, slightly lighter than white on the owl card. And that's normal for a cover, actually. The owl card, this is for the interior pages specifically. So we're using it for the cover, but it's supposed to indicate white for an interior page. And the covers are a brighter color than the interior page. Overall impression of this book is dramatically improved. I'm just going to give it another once over before we evaluate the gloss. Looks like we have a little paper tag here. I think what this is the automated grabber that pulled the pages from the press makes these little tags of paper. And this one just got flopped down during the press, so I'm just going to push it back in place. I don't think we need to repress for that. Glorious book. Dramatically improved and preserved. Let's have a look at the gloss. I think it's rational to say, well, what about the gloss for the wet clean? Does it affect the gloss? Look at the sheen on this cover. Beautiful gloss, beautiful sheen. I don't think anybody could make a reasonable argument that the gloss has been affected by that wet clean, the aqueous bath, or the photo bleaching for that matter. So it presents beautifully now. I think this book is ready to go back to Mike, and I think he's going to be very pleased with it. But before we send it back, let's spend a little bit of time looking at some stills and evaluating our work. I'm including this arm's length type image. Before is on the left and the after is on the right, really to show that at arm's length you can't tell there's a big difference here. The colors are not faded, There's no obvious loss of gloss or anything else that affects the way that this book presents, other than it looks just a little bit cleaner. We have to take a closer look to see the improvements we've made. So here's the top banner. You can see that stain through the 50 cent, and number 73 is gone. You can also see that the white, which is most obvious in that price box, is brighter on the cover. Other than that, there's not a dramatic difference here in the top banner. The interior of the cover tells a different story, and this is where our work really gets displayed. You can see in the before image that the paper was a little bit yellow, just very slightly tanned, not even quite to off-white on our owl card. But the after picture is really a quite brilliant white. The stains that were evident on the top, both on the front and back of the cover, are effectively completely removed, and the page just presents so much better now. And look what a dramatic improvement we made on the back cover. This book really presents much better in person now than it did when we started. The soiling has been removed, the tanning has been removed, the stain has been removed. We've retained really bright, vivid colors, so we've had essentially no loss of ink here. We've had no loss of gloss, and we just have a book that presents much better than when we started. And it's preserved because it's been deacidified for the next generation. If we look at the spine under magnification, here on the front, I'm looking to see, did I make the color breaking spine ticks worse? Did I create any problems? Do I have nice staples? Did I remove any spine ticks that were removable? And I'm happy to say I think we did all of the things we wanted to do, and we did none of the things we don't want to do. If we take that same look on the back cover, we can see we dramatically decreased the soiling. It's much more obvious on the back cover. Cleaned and brightened the paper, and really got a great result. Couldn't be more pleased. The inks look brighter, and look what a dramatic difference we made in this upper right corner of the back cover. Incredible. I'm going to call this project an unmitigated success. I'm just thrilled with the outcome we got. We clearly demonstrated how full aqueous deacidification bath can benefit not only our golden and silver age treasures, but our copper and modern treasures as well. We used only archival materials and methods to remove the stains that were plaguing this comic book, while removing the harmful acids that are naturally present in pulp paper and would eventually destroy our comic book if not dealt with. The paper is now stronger than we started and has greater permanence as well, because we left an alkaline reserve in the paper to protect it against future acid-catalyzed hydrolysis of the cellulose. We also preserved the color gloss this comic book was manufactured with, preserved the original staples and replaced them in the exact locations from which we took them with the correct orientation and even the original curvature of the staple arms. Importantly, we didn't worsen the tiny color-breaking spine ticks, which were existing flaws we could not address with our conservation. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today for this final episode of this modern comic book conservation project. Most of the conservation materials I featured in the video are available from Amazon in the affiliate links in the video description if you need any of them for your own conservation projects. If you enjoyed this video, please take a few seconds to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, take care of one another.